Hey guys, welcome to Ask Steve About Cars. Today's a super exciting day because as you can see behind me, we have a 2026 Dodge Charger Sixpack. To my left, we have the outgoing model, which was discontinued back in 2023. Until 2024, they brought out the EV Charger, which people weren't as excited about, and I don't blame them because in reality, this car has a heritage of muscle, drag racing, and all that fun adrenaline stuff. I'd really like to dive in and show the differences between the outgoing 2023 gas Charger, and we're going Scatpack to Scatpack here, so this is a perfect comparison. Why don't we start things off with a walkthrough of the 2026 Charger. So as you can see, the Charger share nameplate, but the similarities pretty much stop there. Obviously, the first thing you notice is that this is a two-door Charger, back to its original heritage from 1970. There is a four-door version available, so if you really like that style, you can get that as well. The outgoing Charger boasted a 6.4 liter Hemi V8 with 485 horsepower and 0 to 60 of around 4.3 seconds. Now, some people have recorded a little bit higher, some people have recorded a little bit lower, but I would guess that that's probably about the median, and that's what Motor Trend reports. This one, however, with the all-wheel drive system giving it a big advantage, has a 3.9 tested 0 to 60, and some people are actually reporting with launch control in different settings to be a little bit faster than that, somewhere around 3.7. So that's quite the difference. While the 3-liter inline twin-turbo Hurricane does not boast the same sounds as the Scatpack, which we all know and love, it does have 550 horsepower. This Hurricane actually is a little bit more responsive to tuning than that 6.4. The 6.4 is pretty much at its limits with the way that its bore is set up. That is one advantage to the Hurricane, again. So you may miss the rumble, but at the end of the day, if it's pure performance you're looking for, the Sixpack might be the right one to go with. Now, it should be considered how much the weight difference is between these two cars. This four-door Charger in its final year weighs around 4,350 pounds, whereas this one weighs around 4,850 pounds. I'm not quite sure where all that mass came from. A lot of it has to do with this platform being originally used for an electric Charger. So I'm guessing the battery pack was replaced with some heavy-duty frame construction, and the fact that it's all-wheel drive is also going to add some drivetrain weight. So I'd really like to compare the outside features of this to the outside features of the outgoing model. Then we'll go through and dive into the interior, which in my opinion is miles ahead of the outgoing model. So Dodge really needed to bring this into the 21st century, and they have in a big way. So first and foremost, at the front end of this Charger is so aggressive. I love the way that it looks. I think it's much more of a throwback to the original 70s Charger design than the four doors were from the last generation. With the gasoline variant, of course, they can no longer do the R-Wing design that had the spoiler going through the front of the car, and instead now has a ventilated high-rise hood on it, featuring the six-pack designation for the Hurricane Inline 6. Around the side, you can see a nice body line that flows from the front to the back. It's accented by 5-spoke aluminum wheels. The front sports massive 14.5-inch Brembo brakes with slotted rotors. A more traditional style setup in the back, but there is no lack of stopping power for this thing. You can option this with a glass roof, much like the EV variant. They will call this a dual tone paint setup because the lower trim has a monotone black paint, with this particular color being Destroyer Gray on the second half. Around back, what was once a speaker is now an actual exhaust. which I'm a big fan of. If you notice, you do have functional vents in the rear bumper, which is pretty cool because a lot of these cars with the wide body stance, that air collects up underneath the bumper and actually causes a lot of drag. So by having that rear ventilation there, that air can escape and create a better, more aerodynamic vehicle. And of course, the EV charging port replaced with a regular gas port. And how could you forget the good old Super B badge for the Scatpack? Another one of my favorite features with the new Chargers is this light bar that goes across the front end. I mean, it glows and lights up in a pattern when the vehicle is started, which I actually really like. And then it shuts down. And this feature is actually carried throughout the back as well on the taillights. You can see in the rear here, as the vehicle is started or unlocked, the rear brake lights light up, and it's almost like it's coming alive. I think that was the intention. And the same thing, and it shuts down when the vehicle is locked. And taking a look at the outgoing 2023 model Charger, there is such little resemblance between the two vehicles. I mean, it truly is an entirely different model. You know, the hood scoop is gone, now replaced with a ventilated hood. Of course, the four doors was signature to the Charger, but I think the changes overall were a good choice because this model is now running on maybe 14 years. It didn't change that much from its original designation. I will say I really like the wheel selection on the outgoing Chargers though. I think they offered more variety and I really like the way that they look. Of course, you still have the Brembos. This one in particular has the SRT brake setup on it. And instead of it being two-tone, of course, some of the additional materials that they use are black. The most welcome change in the switch from the previous generation Charger was that rear light, and I believe that the new one is even better looking. But the differences don't stop there. This interior has been completely redesigned in 2025 and 26. You see bright touchscreens that go across the entire dash. 16 inches over here for the driver's dash gauge cluster, and the center console screen is at 14 inches as well. This cool wavy design that goes through the door panel stretches across the dash as well. It's integrated with the attitude lighting, which can be adjusted and changed within the vehicle settings. I do really like this door card that goes through the cabin. This cool cross-stitch design has a 3D effect on it. It's actually a nice quality material that's used as well, combined with the leather. Overall, I love the door cards on these. The door release is here, it's a button, but for those that don't know, there's also a manual release here. This particular model is set up with memory seats. Most of the Scatpacks will come with that. There's on this door panel is one of Chrysler's famous Easter eggs. Throughout the vehicle, you may see some throwbacks to previous generations. This free-flowing design and futuristic design flows throughout the cabin as well, and actually lights up with the entire vehicle. It's called attitude adjustment lighting, and you can change the colors up to 64 different colors in the vehicle settings. Continuing left to right, you have a button center down here for different things like headlights and the hood release, which is actually a button and not a latch. I do believe there is a manual release though underneath the steering wheel. Again, you can see that large digital cluster display and the center infotainment screen. I'll go more into what these buttons do and how they work. You can see the vents are lined up in a cockpit style, much like some of the older sports cars were. And if you have some additional buttons for traction control and different features down there. This is a ventilated wireless charging pad. I believe it goes up to 30 watts, which is pretty impressive, and it won't overheat like some of the other ones. You have a pistol style gear selector here. I actually like the way that it feels, although like the other Chargers, it does not have the manual mode in the gear selector itself. Instead, you have to rely on the paddles. You're starting the vehicle. I constantly fumble to look for a button behind the steering wheel. In this particular car, the engine start-stop is located behind the gear selector. It's an interesting choice, but I'm not mad at it. Of course, gone are the days of a manual parking brake, and this one also has an electronic parking brake right here. Behind those, you have the center console storage, which is pretty ample for a sedan. I do also like the passenger layout. There's just something about the dynamics of the materials and the angles in which they sit that really makes it feel like a quality and quite comfortable car, actually. Of course, you have a standard glove box. Not too much to say about it. It's a good size for a sedan. Just for comparison's sake, this is the interior of the 2023. And you could see that this design has been around since 2009. It hasn't been updated very much since, and I think that the changes in the new Charger are welcomed. And now I can go through what some of these buttons and different functions do in the cockpit. So I really like Chrysler's design of having the center dash, or excuse me, the driver's dash and gauge cluster pretty much completely controlled by this up, down, left, and right, and OK buttons. So it's pretty intuitive. There's arrows that show you which screen they change to, and the up and down just scrolls through submenus within those screens. I actually like that design because it's nice and simple. And like I said, it makes sense. There's some vehicles out there where I can never figure out how to even get to something like the odometer. I really like that Dodge and Chrysler have kept this simple. With that being said, there's still a ton of stuff in this screen. There's also different layouts. This one shows a lot of driver information, but this button here, which traditionally in Jeeps and other Chrysler vehicles does a panoramic view of different things that you can adjust. In this one, it changes screen styles. So you have a very simplistic screen here with just the miles per hour displayed instead of having everything else. So if you just want a simple, very simple speedometer, you can have that. There's also the map display, which I think is a welcome feature here because a lot of people like being able to see this. I know I do, especially going to a new area. Even if you're not using GPS, you can tell what streets are coming up, and it's very convenient. And then, of course, back to the standards display where you can change and cycle through each screen. There's a ton of information in here. There's gauges. You can monitor everything on the vehicle. The next one has driver info, such as your trips, and the first one has different settings for your safety and driving aids. Then, of course, you have audio. And yes, this particular model, I'm not sure if you can see, it's kind of hard there, but it does have a heads-up display, and the height and different brightness settings can be adjusted from the screen as well. Messages are actually for the vehicle. If you have some type of service due, they will display here. And then settings allows you to adjust different things like what is displayed in the corners and different color layouts and things like that for the Charger. Of course, you have the performance pages. It wouldn't be an SRT vehicle without it. And it shows things like timers, 0 to 60s, and G-force, so along with propulsion and speed. On the right of the steering wheel, of course, we have the level 2 driving aid. So this is a adaptive cruise control, which essentially, as long as you keep your hand on the wheel, it does everything else for you. It stops and goes in traffic. It keeps you in lane. It's a pretty dynamic system, and it works well. Of course, you also have standard cruise control if you want to just stay at one speed on the highway. Going over to the center screen, excuse the dust. They're building next door, and there's quite a bit of dust down here, but we try to keep these as clean as we can. But it's kind of hard to avoid sometimes. And people have been playing around in here trying to learn it, so just forgive that. I will say that is one thing with the Charger, though. While there's not a lot of gloss black plastics like I usually don't like in vehicles, these large screens, I would 100% recommend a screen protector that actually is anti-glare and anti-dust, because they're so large, they're angled at a way that sunlight's going to hit this in certain ways, and you're going to see every fingerprint, or even worse, may glare back at you. Of course, this particular Scatpack has the heated seats, ventilated seats, and heated steering wheel with different levels of adjustment in each one. And the passenger also has those features. They don't have a steering wheel, of course, but heated and ventilated seats are over there. The layout for Uconnect 5 is similar to some of the other models. It's a really responsive and generally intuitive system. One thing with it, though, is that it is very customizable. So some people are a little intimidated by how much is actually in here, but I promise after you play with it for a little while, it's pretty easy to figure out. Quick controls are up at the top. So this menu up here basically stays throughout every screen. Things like your time, outside temperature, and then quick climate control adjustments. So you could change those on the go. The first screen is the home screen. Now, the way that Chrysler and Dodge does this allows you to add widgets, change these. You could change your phone over here if you want. Lots of different options up here. You could arrange how they're laid out, how many pages there are. Like I said, it may be intimidating, but I actually like that you have as much ability to make this your own car as you can. The media page is pretty straightforward. You have Sirius XM along with your CarPlay settings. One thing I will say, while this screen is getting kind of outdated because most people are using CarPlay and Android Auto, this is where you go to change your audio settings, because this does have an Alpine audio system. And if you want to change things like the subwoofer settings, you have to be able to go to media and click those audio settings so that you could change some of those things. Moving on, next is the comfort screen. Now, the comfort overall on here is actually decent. All the buttons for your dual climate, along with zone control, AC, recirculation, and fan speed are located underneath the screen. And while it seems like a haptic touch button, and it is, it's actually responsive. When you press different buttons on here, the whole panel kind of pushes. It's strange, but it does feel like a physical button, and it's responsive, and it doesn't tend to ignore fingers inputs like some haptic feedback panels do. But yeah, just a standard comfort screen. Everything that's down here is also up here. The phone menu, I could set up a phone, but it's very simple. You just hit, you want to pair a phone now, hit yes, open up your Bluetooth settings, pair them up, and then bam, you have wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Super convenient. And it connects through a Wi-Fi or hotspot signal, so as soon as you turn the car on, CarPlay is ready to go. You don't have to wait for things to load up. Now, one of the main pages that people want to look at are in the vehicle settings. This is why I like the way Dodge does things. They want everybody to be able to set things up the way that they want them set up. So different things like the overall profile, themes, and all those driving aids that some people do not want are adjustable in here. Even the sensitivity of how far back the emergency braking and how close to a lane the car will let you get in the lane management. These are all adjustable in this vehicle. But really, it would take me about an hour to go through every single thing in this screen. This is where I usually recommend folks to just kind of sit with the car, go through, and actually look at what each thing can be set up to do. Because there's some hidden stuff in here. For example, different settings for how the key works. Do you want the seats to recline when the car is turned off so you can get out easier? Do you want the car to turn on AC when it's hot out, when you remote start it? There's a lot of hidden features in here that most people overlook, but they're there and you just have to find them. The controls page is where you change things like the vehicle cameras and the dimmers for the mirrors. Another thing that's in here that I should mention is the attitude adjustment. So those 64 colors that run through the door panels, all the way to the back seat pretty much, are changed here, and the brightness as well. So if it's too bright at night, you can just turn it down. The dashboard page is where a lot of the performance options are. So you have performance pages. Most of these are visual only to show you different things, like the gauges screen, of course, shows vehicle status for different systems in here, as well as your propulsion and G-force. While the performance pages are more for information, the race options and drive modes are where you can customize things. So in here, you have the different drive modes that you could select between, sport being the most aggressive, and while auto is more of an economical setup. Now you can actually run this in eco just to reserve fuel and help it shift a little bit smoother for lower speeds. When you go to sport, you'll notice that you have the option to go rear-wheel drive. So yeah, while this is an all-wheel drive vehicle, it does have disconnects for the front axles by switching this over to rear-wheel drive only. So if it's burnouts and donuts you're looking for, you could still do them in this car. Autonomy shows some of the safety features with the vehicle and an overview of how everything works. Camera obviously allows you to look at the vehicle's cameras, all 10 of them, if you so desire. So yeah, I say we start it up, see what it sounds like. Now let's take a look at the power plant that is the Hurricane, which is the heart of the Sixpack. So it's not new. The high output Hurricane has been around, it's been applied in a couple of vehicles now, most notably the Ram RHO and the Ram Limited. In this configuration, they were able to squeeze a little bit more power out. So you're looking at 550 horsepower and 520 foot-pounds of torque. Now, some people question reliability amongst other things with the Hurricane engine. But let's look at the facts. You have a closed deck engine, much like legendary engines before it, notably the 2JZ and the S58. Same design, same concepts there. Why fix something that isn't broken? Dodge also uses plasma transfer wire arc technology to coat the piston rings and other internals, so the initial break-in period is less harsh on this engine. You're looking at forged internals, forged pistons, forged rods throughout. I don't see any reason that this engine shouldn't be able to last a long time under a lot of pressure. This engine is also torquey down low, and once that boost kicks in, this thing flies. Yeah, so it doesn't sound like a Hemi, but it doesn't sound bad. In fact, it kind of reminds me more of like your BMWs, that kind of thing, which I'm not opposed to. The real question is, how does it drive? So what are your thoughts on the new Dodge Charger? Leave a comment below to let me know. I think they hit a home run here. The overall design, comfort, and performance has been better than ever. While it may not boast that old legendary Hemi V8, which I do miss myself, it won't be long before someone gets one of these outrunning a Hellcat.